6 months later, I walked into the federal courthouse in Salt Lake City, Utah to be sentenced. I remember that day when I walked in, there's a real feeling in a courtroom. It's a sterile feeling, and you can't deny anymore what's going on. When they say the United States of America versus Portia Louder, it's like a pretty big deal. You're like, my whole country, I'm an enemy to the country. It was a big deal. And I was like, what have I done? And I remember I just started to cry. I was sitting in the front of the room, and my husband and kids were behind me, and I looked back and I thought, I am so sorry for what I've done and what's going to happen. At this point, I'm facing 0 to 7 years in federal prison. And I knew when I walked in, the judge is going to give me 7. You know, maybe I deserved it for the way that I'd acted. I don't know, but I knew that's what would happen. And I remember he said, Miss Louder, you know, he told me I could get up and say something, but I thought, why? The decision's been made, you know, but I just said, I am so sorry. I am so sorry for what I've done to my husband, my community, my children. And I said, I probably deserve what you're going to do today. And he said, I'm sentencing you to 84 months in federal prison, which is 7 years. And he said, you'll be a mother again someday. My youngest child, CJ, was 7 years old. So I was sentenced to her whole life in prison that day. The judge wasn't very happy with me, so he asked the marshals to take me into custody that day. I didn't expect that because, again, I'm not a danger to myself or others, and I'm not a flight risk, right? My husband stood up, and he pled with the judge on my behalf. He said, please don't do that to her. Please give her the chance to say goodbye to her kids. She's going to need that to get through it. That's when I knew I married the right person. Like, I kind of knew before then, but I'm just like, yeah, that's a big deal. So the judge gave me 8 weeks to say goodbye to my family. And I remember leaving the courthouse. I couldn't speak for a couple hours because I just felt like, what have I done? He gave me the maximum sentence. I must be a really bad person. And the other thing was, how could I have been such a fool? How could I have traded everything important, time with my children, for money? I realized I'd been tricked, not just by drugs, but by money. Like, I had been such a fool. I went home that night and I cried the whole night. The next day I drove my son to school and I cried, and I just looked at him and said, why did I not ever know how beautiful it is to drive you to school? How did I not get that? I watched my children sleep, and 8 weeks later, one of the things we had to do in that 8 weeks, my husband was still planning to go to trial. He hadn't pled yet. I remember our daughter Sadie, who was 12, and our son was 14, she goes, Mom, are they going to put Dad in prison too? And I said, no, they're not going to. And she goes, Mom, I don't believe you anymore.